We have been able to pass the renewable energy standard in the state, nation leading, and that is producing jobs in this state right now, both because of wind and solar, but also the upgrade of the grid that is happening all across this state, and even more will be coming with battery technology investments all across the state. But we also have to do more, and that is why we have the Jobs Task Force working right now to be able to move forward for the short term with jobs on the ground for folks. That is very important. Let's throw out what doesn't work. What will I do? What will the 3 steps be? Let's throw out the ineffective programs that are not working for workers in the state of Minnesota, and they are not producing the jobs that we should be producing in our state. So throw those out. Next, choose the most effective programs across the country that are growing jobs, and let's bring those in here and start to pass them and get them up and running. And the third thing is, let's value working people in this state. Let's go back to valuing working people. Because you know what I believe built the middle class in this state? I believe what built the middle class in this state is a strong union culture in this state that was able to drive wages up and we need to return to belief in those union systems that help people organize, that help people get better wages, and it lifts all boats. It is very important.
We can't just take care of certain parts of the jobs climate. We got to remember parents who have kids need childcare, need affordable childcare. You can't ignore the fact that some people can get a job now if they're low income. They qualify for sliding fee childcare in Hennepin County. They're told 2 years, come back and we'll get you childcare. That doesn't work. We have to address the comprehensive needs of the children and of a working people. And the way we're going to balance the needs is recognize that we can't continue the trend we're on where we're ignoring the problems and hoping they go away. The governor, in his budget cutting in order to balance the budget, he cut general assistance medical care. His own administration said it's the 31,000, the sickest people in the state. He claims it'll save $380 million. And it would under only one condition, and that's that those 31,000 people cooperate and stop getting sick. And it doesn't work that way. They get sicker, and they use the emergency room, and it costs us more. The reason we're breaking our budget and the reason we can't afford all these priorities is because we've ignored the problems and hope they go away. I think we need to aggressively move forward. That's why I like the Minnesota Health Plan. My single-payer legislation covers every Minnesotan for all their medical needs. By treating chemical dependency and mental health problems, we actually prevent crime. We prevent out-of-home placement of kids. We save a lot of money in human services, in crime costs, in healthcare costs. It's by addressing the problems up front that we're going to be able to do it. And the same thing with education. When people talk how expensive education is, that bumper sticker had a lot of wisdom. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And we can do better. We as a state in the 1970s did better. I want to make sure 2010 we start doing better again.
Everything in this room comes from the ground. And I have lived in rural Minnesota all my life. And we can all talk about green energy. But to build a windmill turbine or to have cell phones and computers and a biomedical industry, electric battery-operated cars takes copper and nickel and those types of metals. And so I'm not going to be afraid to support copper-nickel mining in Minnesota because we need those materials. They should be done right here in Minnesota instead of rooting some environment in another third world country. But specifically, you know, the Big Stone project didn't get built. What we need to do is take a lesson from the co-ops. We should have, and I'm meeting with a gentleman next Monday from Spain, we should have small 25, 30 megawatt power plants like we have and converted in Hibbing, Virginia, Minnesota to burn waste wood. We should burn your waste products out there. And that's one of the first things I would do. And we've got to have a good educational system that does research. That's why I funded endowments for research at the University of Minnesota. We wouldn't have an Iron Range if somebody at the U hadn't discovered the taconite process. We need to have the research that makes sure that your products replace fuels, plastics, whatever, that you grow out in western Minnesota so that your people can stay there and your kids can stay there. And the other thing, we should put some state jobs out there. We've got telecommunications now. A lot of state jobs could be moved to rural Minnesota.
We spend more on health care and get less in return than any country like ours in the world. It's deeply wrong. So we've got to do a couple things. First off, we've got to guarantee that health care is affordable for all. We've got to say that your job doesn't depend on it, especially if you lose your job. That's when you need health care. That's not when you're supposed to be taken off of it. We have to make sure you've got access to quality care. We also have to make sure that the insurance companies aren't able to dictate it all. It's why I'm so passionate about the idea that we've got to have a public option in all of this. So, and finally, we've got to figure out a different way to compensate everyone. Instead of just compensating you for doing a procedure, you ought to be compensated for making you healthy. Now, the way to do that, first off, is to lay out all the money in that system and then go get the reform. That is a whole lot harder than we thought. We've seen what's been going on in this country, but we need to lay out a couple principles. That idea of having access to all is not a small issue. Now, I think what's going to happen is the federal government is going to pass something that's going to be nowhere nearly as strong as we would like it to be. It must have a public option, but I don't even know if that's going to happen. I'm working hard as I can to mobilize people for that. But I can guarantee you Minnesota is going to have to go beyond that. We are going to have to say that it's going to have to be universal. We're going to have to find a way to remove pre-existing conditions, and we're going to have to disconnect it from jobs.
What we need to do in Minnesota to turn things around is getting the economy going again. And the other thing that I think is really important to think about is that we know what to do to accomplish that. We don't need to study it anymore. We need a governor who's actually going to go out and lead and put the things on the table about what we need to do. So there's a couple things that the state can immediately do. The first is use the dollars that we invest every year, a big bonding bill, use our legacy amendment dollars, transportation dollars, renewable energy infrastructure dollars, use them to create jobs and have that as a priority as we think about what we're going to do with those dollars. The second thing we have to do is make sure that we acknowledge what's going on in the private sector right now, which is that credit is tight because the banks aren't lending money. And we should do things like using our economic development dollars to back up small business loans so that the banks start lending and have more comfort to do that, and use tax incentives in targeted ways to make sure that private businesses will start doing the kind of jobs that we need to do, like right here at the Mall of America and in other places. Another thing that we have to do is make sure that the money that we're spending, public money that we're spending to create jobs, is actually creating good jobs. And that means enforcing our labor laws, as I said before, much more effectively, prevailing wage, making sure that we're demanding in job Z zones to the extent that they continue, that they are actually creating real living wage jobs. The last thing that I think the governor has to do is not do what this governor has been doing, which is going around the country and telling people that Minnesota's a bad place to do business because of our taxes. We need a governor who's going to go out there and sell Minnesota. Say it's a great place to do business. We have an educated workforce, hard-working workforce, and lower costs than a lot of other places. Lower energy costs, lower healthcare costs. We need to make Minnesota a place where people want to come and sell Minnesota instead of selling it short like Governor Plenty's been doing.